Happy Lunar New Year to all my listeners. In Chinese, we say "恭喜发财." I'm Cantonese speaking, sort of. Actually, really bad at Cantonese speaking. Anyways, which you've likely heard before. You've likely heard "恭喜发财" before in all those Mandarin all-you-can-eat buffet restaurant commercials. Now, there's one possible translation, if you can be a little bit liberal, uh, quote unquote, wishing you become wealthy, which I've tweaked and simplified to I hope you get richer. Because honestly, if you've been listening to the show, especially if you've been with me since the beginning back in 2016, or if you've been following my blog as far back as 2010, you are or should be rich. Hopefully, you've taken lessons, tips, and tricks from many of Canada's finest real estate investors I've had on the show, implemented many of those tips and tricks and whatnot. As such, you should already be rich, or you are already rich. Hence, I use the term, I hope you get richer, along with all that other stuff about happiness and health. From my family to yours, 恭喜发财. It's the year of the snake, and last year was the dragon, though I think they were accidentally switched. Last year, I think, was the year to be strategic, which is the theme of snake. This year is the year to build wealth, which would be more like a dragon. Some of my Canadian clients have already started. They started early last year. They are, of course, really happy. They kind of got the timing pretty right as they bought in the U.S. and now they're quite happy with the U.S. currency gains, and they are, of course, enjoying that U.S. dollar cash flow. For example, I sold some US dollars in my Scotia account. Scotia, love them and hate them. They offered me, actually, no, I took it. I bought Canadian dollars for 1.42 Canadian per US dollar. That's the most I've ever sold US dollars for. Have you ever been excited? So, on to another different note. Have you ever been this excited for a federal election? I haven't, because I've never had so much riding on this outcome. Provincial elections, not so much. I've seen the housing platforms of the provincial Liberals and NDP. If their goal was to make long-term rentals an even worse investment for landlords, then they've hit the nail on the head. For example, the Liberal platform includes rent controls, rent whatever policy similar to Manitoba. Manitoba's 2025 rental increase allowance is 1.7%. Back to government. Under our current government, both provincial and federal and Trudeau, whatnot, I know he's gone. But anyways, housing affordability is historically bad. I'm not using the last 2 years. I'm looking at more a larger picture. I usually look at real estate from like a 50-year, 20-year, 10-year term, 5-year term, whatnot. Not enough has been done for affordable housing. I think most people know that at some point in Canada, we stopped investing in subsidized housing, government housing, back in, I think it was the 80s. We're in a recession in real GDP terms, absolutely, and everyone's feeling the pressure of the historic inflation. The average rent in Canada is now $2,109. Now, you heard that correctly. That's across Canada, $2,109. To give you a context, that's about enough to get you a house in Edmonton. I like to talk houses because I've always grown up in houses. Now, put yourself in the shoes of a young, highly skilled Canadian, because they do have choices. I was speaking to a young electrician just last week in the Durham region of Ontario, and he told me all his coworkers are already talking about moving to the States. Now, let's dig into an example, because I love examples and I love context. I often believe context is everything. Alabama, one of the many markets that we service here at Share, and we already have clients buying in Alabama. Alabama would be the 5th poorest state in the U.S. if Canada were to join as the 51st state. And then Canada would in turn be the 4th poorest state. It's never happening, by the way. Anyways, that same 2,109 Canadian dollars that gets you a house in Edmonton would be enough to also get you a house in Huntsville, Alabama, a prime investment location where NASA has a major presence, employing 7,000 people. Plus, down the road, there's another 45,500 people working at the U.S. military's Redstone Arsenal, including contractors from Lockheed Martin and Boeing. Huntsville population growth is expected to be triple than the U.S. national average. And do I even need to mention the difference in weather, especially winter weather, between Alabama and Edmonton, Alberta. And then for fun, for the cost to rent a one-bedroom condo or Vancouver, you could rent an 1,800 square foot house with a large lot in Huntsville, Alabama. Our clients literally own a house just like that, 1,800 square foot house. They paid 235,000 for it. Rents for $1,700 a month. Estimated annual appreciation 4.3%. Cap rate for those of you who are sophisticated, no commercial investing, 5.7%. Now, the good news for your Canadian real estate investors, this is a Canadian show after all. The best recent news is, I think you already heard it or seen it in the news, the increase to capital gains inclusion rates hasn't passed. Unfortunately, the CRA is saying that we need to pay it for 2024. But if the Conservatives win, we will likely revert back to the original tax rules before former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Minister Chrystia Freeland changed them. For me and my clients, that means a much more profitable exit for our Ontario properties after tax. All you investors out there, I'm sure, are excited about this. And it's not just investors; it's so many people. It wasn't just us that were opposed to this tax change, especially doctors, all across Canada. Now, speaking of clients, one of my most experienced investor clients who owns over a dozen rental properties is a professional property manager as well, and has been a landlord himself for over 2 decades. He just called me with good news. There's always a silver lining to all news. His tenant, after 9 months of non-payment of rent, is finally getting evicted. Actually, today, she owes him over $30,000 in rent and plus damages, as the belief is that she's trashed the place. Ontario's broken landlord system. So this tenant's already been in front of the Landlord-Tenant Board twice. The first hearing was mediated, so there was a settlement for a payment plan. The tenant failed to pay after the second month of the payment plan, so the settlement terms were broken. Now, so I was talking to my client. So I said, "Oh, great! So you can move for eviction immediately because that's how it used to be before COVID." Now, modern day landlord-tenant board, the tenant appealed. She got a stay to further delay the process, and at the second hearing, she presented her evidence that she has no money. I don't know why she got a hearing to share that evidence, but the adjudicator did rule for eviction, and then there was a 2-week wait for the sheriff, as that seems to be how long it takes for a sheriff in Hamilton, which is probably the best I've heard in Ontario. Eviction is literally today, and the tenant's belongings are still inside the house. So we don't have an update yet on the condition of the property, but it's not looking good. So meanwhile, her rent was $3,300 per month, and that's in Hamilton. It's not the fanciest place in Canada. That's about 50% more than a house in Edmonton or that house in Huntsville, Alabama. Our housing is expensive in Canada in general. And then if you factor in incomes, rents and prices here just don't justify it. Canadians are struggling. I honestly weep for this country. I weep for my country. I weep for the younger generation. There are tough times ahead. There are many good things about being Canadian. I am very grateful for the opportunity that I've had, my parents have given me, and the opportunities I've given my kids, and the kindness of Canadians. You know, it's often the leaders of countries that a lot of us don't like. But it's the people are generally just wonderful. Inflation has honestly made things worse for everyone. Everyone. Market rents have skyrocketed when you compare it to pre-COVID. Many landlords are struggling out there as they can't make their numbers work. I literally have clients who have let their property managers go because they couldn't afford the excessive negative cash flow. They were already negative. They couldn't afford being extra negative with having to pay property managers. I'm a member of the Small Ontario Landlords group. That's SOLO for short. Small Ownership Landlords of Ontario, SOLO for short. And every time I check, there is someone pleading for help. So the one post that caught my attention today was to quote, "A tenant didn't pay rent for 12 months. At the hearing, he lied to the adjudicator saying he did pay. Now there's another hearing." So 12 months without rent. For a small everyday investor, that's likely going to financially ruin them, and they'll likely never be landlords again. Bad tenants are gaming the system. Uh, and it's sad. It's sad that some tenants are so desperate that they're willing to commit fraud. It's like the one that's just mentioned today. So why I'm investing in the States? Well, the author of The Wealthy Barber, former Dragon's Den dragon David Chilton from Waterloo, Ontario, recently said, "Don't be a landlord. There are alternatives that are better." And this is his advice to Canadians. I couldn't agree more. Life's too short. I want my investments optimal, headache free. I want my rental income to be predictable, cash flow positive, and backed by strong property rights. What investor doesn't? Now, on to this week's show. We have Kevin Costain, who is the poster boy for reform being needed in Ontario, as he's doing something about it, as the new chair of SOLO, Small Ownership Landlords of Ontario. He's fighting for the small everyday investor, just like I do with this show. He is the author of the book Rent at Ruin, where he documents his ordeal with his tormentor, the tenant living inside his house. It's an all too common story where an everyday homeowner has a life change, makes what used to be a financially pragmatic decision to rent out the house instead of selling it. And what proceeded to happen is easily among the worst stories I've ever heard, and that is not hyperbole. For a sneak peek, I fed the transcript of the interview to ChatGPT and asked what crimes the tenant could have been charged with. Here's the list: arson, vandalism, theft, fraud, criminal harassment, which was honestly the worst part. Oh, and the victim was Kevin. Illegal drug cultivation. So I've actually have links in the show notes as well of Kevin walking through his burnt out house with the CBC. Also on Facebook, you can find Solo Landlord. If you search Solo Landlord, again, I have links in the show notes if you want to prefer that. And the website for Solo is solo.ca, SOLO.ca. Please enjoy the show, do your research, make real estate investing profitable again.
Hi, Kevin. What's keeping you busy these days?
Quite a lot keeping me busy. It's been quite a week. How are you doing, Erwin?
Just a week? Yeah, well, yeah, you were just named chairman.
Right. I took over the position of chairman of the board at Solo,
Mhm.
and that was January 1st, 2025. And my tenant just the day before passed away. So
That's crazy. Is that recent?
yeah, it was really, the timing was strange in a way. It's almost like a cosmic thing, but yeah. And we had voted me onto the board, the chairman of the board, in April. So this was that far ahead of time.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's been really kind of low key with the holidays.
Mhm.
Did you have a great holiday?
Oh yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I spent most of my time in a communist country. Fascinating to watch.
Oh, China.
Yeah.
Was it China? I saw
Mhm.
pictures of, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's
You
fascinating.
have a good time there?
Oh, wonderful time.
Yeah.
As long as you're not in trouble or a successful entrepreneur, I think it's quite comfortable in China.
Well, what about the border? At the border,
I needed a visa. Yeah.
and do they really like harass you at all, or they're pretty easygoing, or?
Yeah. Yeah, one interesting thing was that so I've been to Hong Kong many, many times. So I've seen it before the pandemic, before the handover, after the handover back to the British. So I'm used to seeing many non-Asians while in Hong Kong and China, and I've never seen so few non-Asians in Hong Kong and China.
Really?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Yeah, they scared off a lot of people.
Well, there's stories, but I've only been to Singapore, so haven't gotten to that part of Asia yet.
Mhm. Oh, it's
I want to go.
I cannot recommend it enough. Just the so I've seen it. I've personally visited at least 3 of the world wonders, 3 of the 7. For example, I've visited Corcovado in Brazil, the Jesus statue. So
I've been
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, I know.
So it's something to
I know what
see,
you mean.
right? Can you
It
imagine
is nice.
people with their bare hands got that up there, right?
Yeah, I kind of felt stupid. I
Mm.
got there. I'm standing there. I'm looking at it,
Yeah,
and I'm like, okay, what do I do now?
yeah.
Do we take a picture like this?
Well, now imagine yourself at the Great Wall of China, which
Yeah.
is 13,000 miles long. and that was built by hand 600 years ago. Right? So the scale is just, you have to see it in person.
Is there points where it breaks
Yeah,
in the chain, or is it just one continuous?
there are some weaknesses in it, and if you read about history, that's how the wall was defeated. Because there are gaps in
And they
the
didn't
wall.
bother building that part. They just kind of.
Well, it's just like for just because of the train, they couldn't really continue it, so it's not completely continuous, 13,000 miles. And then again, the funny thing about history was just I love learning about the history because that saying, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So the wall was famously defeated twice. One was through one of the areas where they didn't complete the wall because of, again, the train, and the other time, simply the invading army had already bribed the military that was guarding that door, like in exchange for money or land or whatever. You open the door for us.
Makes sense. The easiest way to get in is they let you in, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Fire no bullets, fire no arrows, and shed no blood. Like,
Right.
so all that effort. you can
Yeah, you don't even need a Trojan horse. Just walk in. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah. Well, no, you have to give up land, but it's not your land. You're going to go the land you're going to give away during the invasion, and then they were occupied for like 90 years after that. But anyways,
So
let's talk about real estate.
yeah.
First off, what's Solo stand for, and what does it do?
Well, SOLO is it stands for Small Ownership Landlords of Ontario, and we advocate for small landlords. We're about small landlords. We support small landlords. We work to bring justice to small landlords, and we work pretty much 7 days a week, pretty much all waking hours. The main board members, we work just tirelessly to help small landlords in any capacity, whether it be going to evictions to help them or answering phone calls. We have a phone line that we answer it directly, or lobbying. We became a lobby group, and we went to Queen's Park to lobby the MPPs directly, looking for change, of course, in the Residential Tenancies Act, change in the LTB. We directly connect to the LTB. We watch for performance indicators of the LTB.
You have board members actively sit during landlord-tenant board hearings.
Of course, yeah. We observe hearings. We have a legion of people, landlords, that also observe hearings. We track all sorts of LTB indicators. We keep an eye on adjudicators. We have a adjudicator rating website we built, ratetheltb.com, where people can go and rate an adjudicator. And also, in turn, while you're sitting there for 3 hours waiting for your adjudicator to get to your case, you can look at ratetheltb.com and see your adjudicator and see what their tendencies are, because people will tell you, well, they're tenant friendly, or they tend to do this, or they don't keep things under control. It's good to know the knowledge in terms of what you're dealing with. It gives you a little bit of an edge, right, when you're dealing with the LTB. So we really get into the LTB, really into the weeds on that,
and also prepare for the LTB hearings,
of course. And we have a wiki, much like Wikipedia for landlords, and it gets into like observing, preparing for hearings, dealing with the sheriff, going after fraud.
And that's on solo.ca?
It's in there. It's in the menu. It's on our member site, though. We have a membership site that actually, it makes me think we should make it easier to find. But we have a membership site that actually, we have our members sign up, and we vet our members as landlords. And then they get access to all of our content, whether it be a wiki page, or it's our webinars. We actually do a ton of webinars, and all of the content is in there and available to our landlords. And it's ever expanding. And we'll talk about that a little later, but some of the stuff in 2025, we're going to really try to push that and expand it more. And we do a ton of stuff for our members, and it's all about and we do it all for free. I should point that out. I'm a volunteer. I am the chairman, and I'm still a volunteer. All of our board members and volunteers are volunteers, right? And we just do it all for the small landlord, and we're all motivated in different ways, but I'm motivated in a way. So what happened to me doesn't happen to others. We want to try to avoid these sorts of scenarios. And sadly, they come to us when they're in trouble.
Because there really is nowhere else to go to. There are
other places to go, and I wish it was more resource for the landlord.
Yeah.
especially the small landlord. But sadly, it's not as much. For me, when I was looking at and I was troubled, and I had a tenant terrorizing me, honestly, it was just like everywhere I went, give me money, and then I'll help you. I didn't even know how they would help me, but they
Right.
wanted money first.
Right.
Solo, one thing is special about Solo is that we don't ask for anything.
Yeah.
You come to us, we're going to help you right away. We don't have a membership fee. There's no cost to the landlord
Mhm.
at any point, right? So we primarily want to help. That's the mission, right?
Right.
And
I will say our clients come to us and we can help them pretty far, but not everyone's knowledgeable. If you've never been a landlord, it's pretty hard to coach someone through this.
right, you know, the Residential Tenancies Act is a
Complicated.
myriad of regulations, and you've got LTB issues, you've got interpersonal issues, you've got, you know, all sorts of damage problems. You've got different laws and contract laws and things like that. And at the same time, we try to build this community that is as robust as possible. And you've seen the Facebook group. You see what kind of comes from this sort of idea where you take like-minded people, put them in a space, and then you do your best to control the access to that space. So we actually, the Facebook group, like more than 80% of people that ask to join, we don't let them in because we vet everybody that comes into that group, right? And so that
It's pretty extensive. The questionnaire.
yeah, right. So we actually have created a space, thankfully, that is, you know, when you ask a question, you get a robust set of answers.
Yeah.
And often you get really good answers from people that are interested and willing to help and want to help. You know what I mean? And that's the kind of communities we try to build at Solo the best we can. It's not perfect, and it's been a difficult road sometimes, but that's what we work on. And we're doing a ton of other things that are, working on building a mailing list. We blog about all sorts of different things, working with landlords to try to get fraud charges for serial professional tenants, which has become a thing now.
Is in the news again.
Yeah, you see this, and media. We've done so much media work, really interviews on every channel, every station, CBC, the National. We just try to get it out, get the story out that, you know, landlords are people too, and we're struggling. And in fact, in the case where you have a tenant that wants to take advantage of you, the struggle is real, and they have quite a lot of advantages that perhaps maybe shouldn't be available to them, you know. And that's some of the stuff that Solo is really working hard to do.
Do you mind I share about some of the screening questions for members to join?
Yeah,
quite
for a
public.
member to join the we of course we want your name and email and all of the rest, but one question we ask that is required is your property address, the unit that you rent out, so we can go and vet that. We check on Geo Warehouse and make sure that, you know, you legitimately own that property. And in some cases we'll call the phone number and talk to the person, and we really care about having our members be legitimate members. Again, nothing is perfect, but we work hard to make sure that is a space where landlords that come to us and they need help, they get that help.
Yeah.
Right. And we want to do more. We're ever expanding this thing. And we ask other questions, like they're optional though. Where did you hear about Solo? You know, other things like, okay, well, if you have a PIN, we want to know that because it helps us vet you easier. You know,
What's your business? Like, if you're in real estate, what is your business?
of course, yeah. What's your RECO number if you're a real estate agent, or
yeah.
what's your LSO number if you're? We have sometimes paralegals that come to us and they register too. So any kind of identifying information that we can vet, but the extensiveness is in direct relation to the fact that we actually look at it and, you know, read them and vet the people. And nobody becomes a member without, like, it's a sort of an opt-in process. So if we can't verify the member, they stay unverified until we verify them. Right.
Yeah. And for listeners' benefit, because we don't want people in there that don't belong in there, looking just to cause trouble, take screen captures, and go.
Well, yes, it's that, and it's mainly also it's a resource issue, right? Like if everybody gets in there, then you know what I mean. There could be
quality falls apart too.
Yeah, exactly. You want to just kind of the use of resources and make it appropriate. So
Yeah.
these are the people that it's appropriate for.
Yeah.
And in other cases, like the Facebook group, we just want to preserve the quality of the conversations the
Yeah.
best we can. And all of those things are just take the effort of sort of pruning and
Mm-hmm.
working it and
Mhm.
vetting. And we have thoughts of even pushing the member system even further. And so the vetting becomes still very important and valuable because we need to know that every landlord is a landlord.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Because someone who's not a landlord shouldn't be giving any advice at a minimum.
some landlords even shouldn't give it.
Yeah. Where I was going to is I'm on
Yeah.
all these other Facebook groups as well, and I've seen some horrific advice given.
It's true.
Right.
And it's
Like pretty much the opposite thing to do. Like, oh, go take the door off.
exactly.
You're not paying rent. Go take the door off. Like,
And let's
oh
face it,
God,
it's the internet, right? And what's interesting is that when you're in a space that is not like people bullying and harassing, you find that actually someone will say that, take the door off.
Yeah.
And then you'll have 10 other people that will say very reasonable responses.
Yeah.
And so it kind of evens out.
Oh, but I haven't seen this stuff like that on the
It's
solo
actually-
Facebook group.
It actually works.
No, the advice I generally see is quite good.
People,
Especially when I know who the good contributors are, I usually see their advice is quite good.
Usually,
And then I have nothing to say after that.
we have an interesting thing where now that's not we can't take credit for that, but I find it's really interesting and curious that people tend to police themselves enough to help landlords, and I think that's what's the point. If I'm a landlord and I'm in trouble
Mhm.
and I need to know how to fill out an N12 or I need to know how long a sheriff is going to take in Brampton, I can go there and kind of get my answer, and that's the. And if somebody is bullying or harassing, they'll report it to us on the admin level, and then we can take action,
Mhm.
and we do. So
Mhm.
it helps sort of preserve that space. Whereas in other groups, communities, online, I won't say any names, but it's a more of a harassment tone.
Yeah.
You know,
And that's the challenge with these, like that Facebook group is like 8,000 members.
8,300 ish right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's gotta be tough to moderate.
It's not so tough. We have maybe 6 or 7 people that watch and moderate, and they they're regularly doing it, and it's not so bad once people are come in and they're tuned to how it works. And we have Thursdays you can post promotional stuff but no other day, and once people figure that out, and then it works out okay.
Mhm.
Most of the time I'm going back to Facebook to see what people are talking about, not to moderate.
Mhm.
So that's, knock on wood, that's good.
Mhm.
Really good.
So I've been in the business for a long time. So Landlord Self-Help Center, for example, was a massive help before the internet got really big.
Mhm.
And then sadly, like so much of their funding has disappeared from the provincial government, even under a conservative government.
That's a shame, right?
That's an absolute shame.
They're such a great resource, and they're
Yeah.
such a great tool. There's so much great information on their site.
Yeah.
I've been to events that they run, and they're spectacular.
Mhm. My wife used
But
to be their
nobody showed
treasurer.
up.
Oh.
Well, hardly anybody showed up. I was like, wow, this is incredible.
A lot of people still don't know about them. For listeners' benefits, Landlord Self-Help Center, they are a nonprofit funded by the provincial government, even though it's been declining. And they have wonderful resources, but the people that can service is very limited. Like the people that can actually handhold and help.
Mhm.
Because I believe you have to be at massive financial risk in order for them to for you to qualify for them to work with you or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know what the parameters are personally,
I think
but
you might have
I
to
know
live
it's
in
a
the
very
property.
small, short list.
I think you might have to live in the property or something.
Yeah,
But that's a very limited number.
and I think that should be expanded. Of course, I think there should be
They have no money under
there
conservative
should
government.
be DROs for landlords. I'm sorry, there's DROs at the LTB, but there should be pro bono services, like legal aid services for landlords available. There should be these kind of things for small landlords just as much as there are for tenants.
Yeah.
Right. And the landlord self-help is, like you say, it seems to be declining, and it's a shame because we would hope that is expanding
Mhm.
and growing, right?
That's the wonderful thing about solo, because I find it complements where their services end, solo kind of picks up. Like it's no cost. You have a lot of really good people helping people who know their stuff, helping people for free.
And certainly that's not by design. And it would be great if that was more by design in particular, where one would end in one, so we would not have any redundancies. They do webinars, we do webinars. Maybe there are overlaps, and it would be great if the resources were all efficiently used. And we don't coordinate with them in any respect.
Mhm.
But yeah, it is a little like that, and it's par for the course, where the fact that landlord self-help would do what they do, and of course we do what we do to try to help landlords. So we're going to be kind of like that, and maybe in the future we'd have some level of connection. I know some people there, and like I said, I've been to events. We're keenly aware of landlord self-help, and we're aware of their mission, and we obviously align in terms of our direct mission. Although landlord self-help is perhaps they would coordinate with larger landlords at different times, depending on their content and their mission. Whereas we are solo. The small is in the name, right? Small landlord.
Well, the executive director of Landlord Self-Help's coming on the show in a few weeks, so I'll talk to her.
Yeah, those are good questions, right? I'm eminently curious about how they operate, what their focus is, how they, of course, having some sort of an alignment where we kind of connect, collaborate. All of these kind of things are solo is all about that kind of thing, because we want to. There are only so many resources out there, and we want to push for justice for small landlord, and we all have to be on the same page to get there. And that's a very challenging.
And the strength in numbers.
Of course, all of that. So
it's my observation. It's the small landlord that's at the most risk, especially the ones who are really casual, right? Oh, I'm just going to buy a condo and rent it out, and then it's usually them that don't properly screen, or they trust the wrong person and they don't properly screen, and they get because there was literally in the news. I think the professional tenant owes like 4 different landlords money. So that immediately means no one screened them. At least 3 people didn't screen them.
Yeah, it's a case where now I think that the professional tenant or the tenant looking to do bad things, they actively go out looking for these folks. And it's not hard to find them nowadays. Still, landlords are becoming more savvy just as much as tenants are becoming more savvy.
Yeah.
But it's still, I think, for a bad tenant who is made a career out of paying first and last and then riding out a year of free rent, they can find that landlord that can be sucked in or gullible, or they can get their friend to pose as a real estate agent and pass them off. All of these things are all on the table, and they just happen with such regularity that thankfully in the media it's becoming more known, but it just happens way too often. We're so busy with this. It should not ever happen, but it's a nonstop barrage of these kind of stories.
And then the act and the board protect these people.
As you know, let's be clear though. The tenants deserve to be protected just as much as anybody deserves to be protected. But people that do bad things ought to be held responsible for that.
Landlords too.
And then we have this environment where they're not being held responsible, and there are little repercussions, and you can get away with things and push it. That's an environment for complete injustice for everybody.
Because that professional tenant, the one in the news, if that's all true, they should go to jail.
Yeah. For what part in particular, I wonder, though?
It's stealing. It's vandalism. It's mischief.
There's vandalism, and that tends to be a probation charge. Then there's the idea of stealing rent, which not really many people have come around to that. They always think that's a civil matter. And you know what I mean? And maybe it's a civil matter because there's no potential violence involved. Like if you steal from a bank, there's potentially violence because you got to wave a gun around maybe. But when you're stealing from a landlord, there's no violence there, or at least so people think. So then that's a victimless crime, as they say. We've got to sort of change this sort of perception of landlords not being human beings. We're people. A small landlord is a person. They rent out perhaps a condo or their basement, or rent out 2 units or they rent out their home because they want to keep their investment. They're human beings. They deserve justice just like anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a matter of asking for sympathy. It's a
Right.
matter of asking for basic justice, right?
Yeah.
You know, when people ask me what would you like the LTB to do, I say, do your job, right? You're your standard for a hearing is 25 days, and you're taking 5 months or 4 months to get to the hearing. You're not doing your job. Let's start with that. You don't have to do any kind of earth-shaking changes to the RTA yet. Just start doing your job. We can
Mhm.
start there, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of this is just a little absurd, a little bit of a rage bait situation. But at the same time, it's also just like if we just get down to business and get it done, we can get there. We can find justice for everybody. Tenants wait 2 years sometimes for actually their standard for some of their T2s, T6s, they're up there a year or more, maybe 2 years. And they're not getting justice either.
Especially and including the tenant when the landlord's at fault here.
Of
They're not
course.
getting justice either.
And we don't know that until the hearing, but they deserve to have their hearings in a reasonable amount of time.
Mhm.
Everybody does.
Yeah. I've watched government for so long, and I'm a pragmatist, so it just irks me how government functions, including the LTB. And I've told you this story before. I've mentioned on the show, so apologies for the listener. Just fast forward this part. But Florida, for example, if you want a hearing for non-payment of rent, you have to post the rent outstanding to the trust account of their version of the tenant board, landlord-tenant board.
Hmm.
Prove you have the money, right? At a minimum here at the LTB, screen capture me your bank statement, prove to me you have the rent, and you can have your hearing, right? If you just want a hearing because you don't have the money, you don't get a hearing.
Hey, that's a reasonable approach. And one other approach
So easy.
we thought about, okay, change it up and say, if you want to file a tenant application for whatever reason, whether it be maintenance or other concerns, you need to show that you're gainfully paying your rent. If you can't prove that you're paying your rent, you can't file a tenant application. I think that is the case in some American states. I think it's Arizona, maybe. And that's a
Saturday.
yeah, and that's an incredibly reasonable approach. Why not?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, here's my rent receipt.
Like
Yeah.
you want justice. You have to show that you're up to speed on what you're doing and you're paying your rent.
Yeah.
A lot of applications for T applications in Ontario would not happen if that was the case.
Yeah, to streamline the process.
Right. And we've asked for, written evictions, of course, this idea of not having hearings at all. If this is an uncontested matter or the tenant cannot prove that they're paying rent, then it's a written order.
Mhm.
And it's just like an L4
Mhm.
ex parte order.
Mhm.
And then that's an eviction. There should be no case in Ontario where a tenant who wishes to do bad things thinks that they can get away with it. Right.
Do you know why we haven't gone back to in-person tenant board hearings? Did they sell off all the tribunal facilities? Like
They have all of those
Hamilton's is
facilities
still there.
as far as I understand. They
Yeah.
still have them, whether they lease or own them, I don't know. But they use them for office space. But what has happened is that they bought a Salesforce-based CRM software for running hearings, and they implemented that over the
Pandemic.
COVID
Yeah.
and right in the late stages of COVID. So they were running through that implementation process, which created backlogs, by the way. They already had backlogs, they created more, but they went through that entire switch of their internal systems that really became online filing, online hearings, and they just never walked back. They never went back. And I think that's a cost savings to them in the end. They see it as a cost savings. They see it as a potential future
It's
of
costing us in service.
removing the physical offices and then, having all the adjudicators working from home. Many of them are, if you watch hearings, you'll see them actually blur the background, but you'll see that they're in their living room, right? So then they would get rid of all this real estate and then they would, realize a cost savings. I think that's the ultimate goal in the end. And as we know from so many different places and so many different people, in-person hearings are far more efficient.
Far more efficient.
They are, there's no roll call, but for saying, "Hey, Kevin, are you in the room?" On Zoom, you watch a hearing and it could
Mhm.
take up to 45 minutes to get
Mhm.
roll call done, right? And that's all hearing time. They're not there 45 minutes early. So we're in this case, and nonetheless, maybe I think the stat was something like 20% or more of matters get solved in like
In the hallway.
hallway.
Yeah.
Yeah, people.
Probably even higher.
There's this sort of a scientific thing that happens that people, when they're behind a computer and sort of anonymous, they kind of they kind of feel more emboldened, right? More
Keyboard
willing.
warrior.
Well, exactly. They're more willing to fight than they would be in person. When you
Yeah.
finally get in front of a person and you shake their hand
Yeah.
and you look them eye to eye, things change completely.
Yeah.
It's a human factor.
Yeah.
And you remove that complete human factor from it's like disembodied,
Mhm.
as they say, right? And when you do that, you not only slow down the process, you make it more inefficient, but you embolden people to fight more, right? So I think that,
Needless to say, it's inefficient.
we don't have anybody. Yeah, we don't have anybody at the LTB that has come to this realization. Certainly not in government that has come to this realization.
Right.
And what we've asked for at Solo is simply just run both at the same time. If you have if you have the parties in a hearing that are willing to do it in person, then have them check a box, if you will, and then we run it all in person.
Mm.
And I think we would find that, most people would probably want to run this in person. The only people that wouldn't want to run in-person hearings is paralegals, because paralegals have seen their revenue jump rapidly
Gee.
from the ability to run Zoom calls multiple at the same time.
I
So
see.
their revenue has increased rapidly
Yeah.
as a result of Zoom hearings. So certainly their incentive is not to have,
Right.
not to have in-person hearings. And of course, there's a cost factor of getting people to go to single locations, Elm Street, downtown. That's quite a trip to go downtown to a place. So there are those factors, I think, that are involved. But I think, if we care about actually getting to a place where the backlog has reduced to a point where they're meeting their set standard, we have to do something that, justifies the process. It's not a
Well, pre-pandemic, we were usually about 3-4 months for our hearing, which is significantly
we
better
were
than
the
today.
backlog pre-pandemic. The backlog was growing for sure, but you go back perhaps a year, and they were running the 80,000 hearings or 80,000 cases resolved every year for at least a decade. They were running at a reasonable pace. It wasn't perfect, but it was perhaps a month.
But you have the data to prove it used to work.
Yeah, well, yeah, we have the data. And here's the thing: in the LTB's recent
Work as in like
well,
3 to
yeah,
4
I
months,
know,
3 to
it's
4
a
months per
loosely,
hearing.
but in their most recent like annual report, if you will, or their annual Zoom, they're like, we have unprecedented levels of files that have been submitted, never before seen, ever all time. But yet, if you look at the numbers they released, it's like 83,000 files they received. For pre-pandemic, every year they were receiving between 78 and 81,000 files. So this unprecedented is only 3,000 more than they've ever seen.
Right.
Like, it's not like,
Yeah.
it's
Well, we
not
added a
like
few million Canadians over the last few years.
yeah, like it's just absurd in a way, because I think that, you don't have to dress it up. They're not doing their job,
Right.
and they're not doing it well, and they're not, maybe perhaps they're not broken, and that's a bit of a touchy subject for them. But, however long you keep this backlog going, it only proves how broken it is. Like, we can't make this the normal, right? We can't, some of these hearings for like L2s or especially blended hearings, when you have multiple files at once, like an L1 and an L2 for damages,
Mhm.
you can see up to a year for that.
Mhm.
Still
Mhm.
today,
Mhm.
after 3.5 years, right? What institution has 3.5 years to fix a backlog?
Government. So I'm old school, right? So I've been coaching investors since 2010, and I haven't only been through it myself. And then the best practice I found, and what I taught to my clients was, when you go to the LTB, find a mediator, find your tenant, negotiate something. You do not want to go because the hearings are priorities given to the easy cases. Anything that needs to be contested goes to the bottom, So there's a good chance you're not being heard that day and need to reschedule.
Well, there are two things there. The one thing is that's leverage. And I've used that leverage in a hearing, by the way, as I represented somebody. That the fact that you don't want to go to a hearing, that's a piece of leverage you can use at the point of mediation. The second thing is that the LTB, they're kryptonite. And I know you like superheroes. The LTB's kryptonite is any kind of complexity.
Yeah.
Not
Or
only
argument,
do they
yeah.
not run hearings that are complex, as you said,
Yeah.
they actually literally break down when you bring a very complex, in-depth, detailed
Yeah.
evidence.
Yeah.
When it gets complex,
Yeah.
whoa, they just grind to a halt. These guys, they can't handle it.
It's way more effort for them. There's way more materials for them to review before the hearing and all that sort of stuff. It's way more work for everybody.
Yeah, they're just not built for that. And so you have cases where we have one tenant that was evicted. Her name is out in public. I won't say the name, but the point is that she actually commanded over many of her hearings 25 hours of hearing block time because of all of her little nitpicky, little things, big things, human rights claims. She actually called the adjudicator racist. It was just an endless barrage of hearing after hearing after adjournment after adjournment. 25 hours of this, and this is 25 hours of block time that is gone to hear other matters, right? So this is what we see at the LTB. It's just not equipped for this. So if you're a tenant, want to do bad things, I'm spilling the tea, as they say. I'm giving it away. Make it complex. The LTB should be better at this. They should have adjudicators that can stop this in its tracks. We could talk about the adjudicator. His name is Ebner. He really didn't do a great job of stopping it or shutting it down. You know what I mean? But this is the problem at the LTB. It's institutionalized. I feel like a bad word is appropriate in there somewhere, but it's definitely this sort of institutionalized thinking of plodding along and we're doing great. We're reducing the backlog, but yet when you look at the numbers, it's something like 7 files a week. I think something in that range. 7 files a week when your backlog is 53,000. Are we gonna end this backlog in like 2065?
And where we are today in January 2025, like the work from home thing is like really minimizing. Like almost every company is requiring employees to come back to office, but we're not seeing any of that for the LTB.
No, I don't think so.
Not even day week.
No. I'm with you. I think that's true. I think I would not be surprised if most of the adjudicators are at home running their hearings. They might come in once a week. Fridays tends to be the day that they do write out orders. Maybe they'll come in on Fridays, but
while the private sector is going back to the office.
Right. I think that's true. It's a lot. I
Well, I don't need to argue with you why I tapped out. Now let's talk about your own journey. See, more people are interested in tapping out.
Well, here's the thing though, at Solo, we recognize that landlords are tapping out and they're leaving the business, but we want them to be in the business. We want them to be landlords. We want small landlords to thrive. We want good tenants. We want the housing market to be a good housing market, at least a balanced housing market. We would like to be in a place where it's not housing crisis every time you pull up a news story. We want to be part of the solution, right? That's what we're after. We're not after, trying to convince every small landlord to walk away, which they tend to walk away. I'll be one of them. I am one of them that walked away. And what we see is that once a small landlord comes to Solo, they get their issue resolved, and then they walk away.
Yeah,
and
because they're coming to us usually because they're in a crisis.
Right, and then they walk away, and that's one less house on the market, perhaps bought by a corporate entity, or maybe bought by a family who takes over that single family home, and that's not a rental anymore.
Yeah, the rental supply's gone forever.
Right.
Yeah.
So we want a good, healthy housing market. That's what we're after. But you put up my book there.
Yeah.
So if you're shameless promotion,
if you're interested in becoming a landlord, let's talk about from rent to ruin.
Yes.
What happened? How did you become a landlord?
I became a landlord mainly because my my fiance at the time, she had decided to move out, and I decided to move in with her, and we moved to Hamilton
Mm.
at the time.
Mhm.
And so my choice was either to keep my home, which I have a semi-detached house in Oshawa.
Mhm.
The choice was to keep the home and continue my commitment to having a property that I purchased, or sell it off, of course. And
Yeah.
so I decided to keep it,
Yeah.
and then I kind of
Financially savvy
for
thing
sure.
to do, yeah.
I wanted to keep the property. I intended to keep it for my life and pay the mortgage. So I would keep it. I thought, okay, I'm gonna rent it out. So I somewhat reluctantly decided to rent out the property, and I went through a very poor. Well, I don't want to say poor. Maybe I could have done. I definitely could have done better. Let's say, yes, I could have done better at the screening. And this person came to me as a tenant, Barry, and as I write in the book, it's just a string of problems and issues, and he terrorized me to no end, and he threatened. He even said at one point in November of 2022 he would get even with me, and then by January of 2023, his son and him, they burned the house down. They burned it out completely, destroyed the house, which had to be completely rebuilt over a process of, say, I think it was 14, 15 months of rebuilding. Uh, and so this book just describes the entire process of trying to go to the LTB, trying to deal with him, the beginnings of the strange things that he would be doing. I had in the lease, don't smoke, and then he was smoking in the backyard.
Yes,
And that
you
was
agreed to do so.
just a month after yeah. And I'm like, he's smoking right inside, like right next to the house. I knew that he was going to flout every single rule I had in the lease, and I
Yeah.
knew that it was kind of coming. And then tension would rise and rise, and eventually the fire. But yeah, that's just chronicles. And of course, there's the bureaucracy, and that's one of the rooms where the son, he had a ton of graffiti. Um, so it just came to a point where I'm like, uh, this.
He intentionally
and,
graffitied you all.
there's even more. Like there was uh, perhaps and this was maybe 8 months before the fire, but he actually had his car burned out completely. There you go. You see the car fire, and that I came. He sends me an email, and then I run to the house to look at the front driveway.
You ran from Hamilton to Oshawa?
Yeah, I had to drive out there to Oshawa, and the front driveway looked like Beirut. I'm like, what happened here? And he says, I don't know. Looks like I think the drug dealers next door did it. And I said, okay, well, all right, your insurance will cover it. I don't have insurance, he said.
On the car.
His car is sitting in my driveway, no insurance.
And he's been driving it?
Well, I only presume he was driving it. I don't know how he got it to. Maybe he just gave up on. But anyway, this all these bizarre occurrences and madness, and it was just like it took like upwards of I found that under the wheel when I came in and looked at the car, and he seemed surprised, and he said he was going to go to the cops with that evidence, if you will, because it's clear evidence that somebody started the fire, right?
So sorry, this is a soul torch. It's a lighter, but this isn't a regular lighter. What kind of lighter is this?
Looks like some kind of
Like a butane
bong.
torch?
It's like one of those bong. You'd light a bong with it, or something like. It's like a torch. You kind of smoking something you light.
Would this be like would that be it looks like a butane torch.
Could be butane. I don't know what kind of fuel is in it, but people in the area, they actually, because I interviewed them after the house fire, the big fire.
Yeah.
This
is a torch. This isn't like a Bic lighter.
No, you're right. And they described an actual, like a exploding sound. Like they described the fire, and it was getting worse and worse. And there was like something blew up. And it's not like the movies, cars don't blow up, right? And I think that actual torch was close to where the fire was started. And eventually it got hot enough, and then that reservoir of gas probably blew. And that's where people heard the blowing sound. And that caused quite a lot of damage. It melted the siding in the front of my house, and obviously it could have started a fire on the house, or next door could have started a fire and killed somebody.
All right.
And it's impossible to know who started that fire. I never knew. I never found out.
He said the drug dealers did it. They
Well,
called
he
the
said,
cops?
yeah, he was.
Was he high?
He was. The thing with my tenant, he lied, and I didn't know at the time that he was such a liar, but he lied about everything. Really, it was just.
What did he lie about during the tenant application process?
He manipulated his credit rating. His credit, I don't know what exactly it was, but it was easily 300 more than what his real credit was. He lied.
That's a lot.
He forged signatures on
Like
the
400 versus 700 credit ratings. A big difference.
I know. It was, yeah, definitely and he had to, because he wouldn't have gotten into my place if he didn't forge that. I should have been more, I could have screened better, and I learned from my mistakes there, but
he lied to you.
But he lied. He right out lied, and he lied about his former landlord. He lied about
But he forged documents.
Yeah,
Like this is stuff you can bring to the cops.
it's so difficult to hold people. The police will not look at a matter if it's not a serial offender. If it's one time and you can't prove that it's multiple different landlords, it's a hard go of it to take that to the police. Now, we worked on all sorts of these matters, and we've had some success. But if you're just one landlord with one tenant, that maybe you can prove it, but you can't prove it with complete certainty that they're a serial offender, they won't press charges. So it's a long string of events that lead up to the house being burned out completely. And
How long was the process from like tenant moving into burning down the property? Like how long were you living with this nightmare?
well,
And then you have to leave after the house is built?
well, he was there about 2 years, but so some indicators of this is it took, I think, about 14 months total for the eviction to get that done. But one thing which I find is most absurd is that the house fire. Okay, the house fire made the house completely unlivable. Of course, all the utilities are off. He has to leave. He's gone into Red Cross. Okay, at that point, I needed another 8 months to get my house back. He can't even physically live in my house, and yet with the bureaucracy of the LTB, I needed 8 more months to get my house back legally. And he was still a tenant for those 8 months.
Even though not living at it, even
Not
though
living there while they were rebuilding.
Right.
If they had rebuilt and finished in 6 months, he would have been able to move back in legally.
Right.
And he was even taunting me. He was saying, why don't you, do you mind if you paint the walls gray for me? Because it goes great with my furniture. Like, he would send me emails just taunting, right? But the reality is that he still had another 8 months of tenancy legally until the LTB finally gave my house possession, as they say, give it back. So this just entire absurd process, this fire would not have ever happened if they evicted in a reasonable amount of time, without backlogs, of course.
and then did you have to prove who caused the fire, or was someone caught?
Yeah. So the person that started the fire, thankfully he was caught on the evening. So the police came. I wasn't there until later at night, but they must have inspected, or they looked at the situation. He actually had burglarized the car as well. He ran over to a neighbor 3 or 4 houses down, broke into that car, stole something out of his vehicle, did something, threw it on the street, or I don't know what he did before he started the fire. So it was a whole thing. Now, he didn't get charged with the theft or vandalism of a vehicle, but eventually they charged him on the spot for arson, and they arrested him.
I wonder how they got him for that.
I think it's pretty obvious. So I think that maybe they went into the house after the fire was. They went into the house and they saw this, and no doubt the tenant, he was trying to pin it on me. He was actually trying to say it was an electrical fire, or trying to say that it was my fault.
Yeah.
Right to the end, he was trying to pin it on me.
How'd they start the fire?
It was in the basement. And I think, based on what I saw there, because I went in, once the police released the scene, I go in there and I look at it's in the CBC report. The video of me walking around, but there's this like clump of like plastic stuff. So I think it looks like car parts, or it looks almost like it could have been like this side, like the door panel. a plastic door panel almost. It looks like maybe he lit a pile of plastic stuff. It doesn't seem like accidental. It seems more like it was this stuff he piled up and maybe started it on fire and let it burn. And then eventually it started burning the drywall, and then it got to the ceiling and started burning, and the whole ceiling, the beams and everything are all burned out. Everything was, so it feels like when I look at that, it was burning for quite some time. It wasn't like a kitchen fire that got out of control, right? It looks like he was maybe enjoying it. And that's the thing that some witnesses described to me. The tenant himself, he was standing there outside the house, just outside the front door, standing there watching as the smoke and the flames. He was just watching, perhaps enjoying it.
It seemed like he hated you, so
Yeah, there. It's a strange thing, you know what I mean? I understand disputes get a little crazy, and then there's hate and there's anger, but it's just some point I don't understand. You know, this guy was fueled by something else, something else I can't describe. And like I said, he's passed away now, so he's died. New Year's Eve, he passed away. So
when the house was being rebuilt, how did you pay the mortgage? Was there business interruption insurance?
yeah, so the insurance company actually was paying me rent as well.
Oh,
So they actually covered.
So you had good insurance. You had proper
Yeah.
insurance for rent.
Yeah, I even described to people how ironic it was that the house had to be burned down to finally get rent, because he had gone by that point 9.5 months without paying rent, and so he finally had to leave the house because it was completely destroyed, and then finally I was getting rent again. Strange. And his rent amounted to, his arrears amounted to $26,650 in arrears. But I'll never see that again.
And your insurance covered the entire rebuild, and they paid you rent so that you could pay the mortgage.
Right. From that point, they paid the rent, and
Yeah.
they covered the rebuild. They covered the
Yeah.
recovery, which is a core part of this, right? One of the things was to early on they boarded up the house, which in my mind it was to keep him out, but
Smart.
they boarded up the house.
No, I think it's the right thing to do, but in general, but yeah.
So they boarded up the house, and then they put in space heaters to keep the house from freezing.
Yeah.
Because it was in January that the fire happened. In fact, maybe a week from now, it would have 2 years now. So
Sorry,
that recovery process was crucial and probably pretty expensive at the time. And so they covered the recovery, and then the disposal, and then they had to gut the house. You saw pictures of it gutted. They ripped out everything down to the beams.
Yeah, because they have to.
Yeah, and they covered all the rebuild and everything. The contractors. Yeah.
Well, thank God you had business interruption insurance. So I believe that needs repeating is, if you're a landlord, have the proper landlord insurance so that you have business interruption, because if you have regular homeowner insurance, they may not pay your rent.
So true.
And then you're still paying the mortgage.
A lot of landlords don't know that there is a different kind of insurance that is, sometimes they call it tenant insurance. Maybe it's just called business interruption.
In my policy, it's business interruption insurance because I have a commercial policy for a rental property.
Indeed, and I often say to people, if it's like $80 a month, then it's not the same. It's not the right insurance. Like, this is more expensive.
Yeah.
And that's how you know.
Yeah, it's way more expensive. I'm like at least like $240, $260 a month for my duplexes.
Exactly. I was like $250 a month. So that's how you know you're probably you can zero in.
You're covered.
Yeah.
That's just the first stress. That's
Right,
the high level.
start.
Keep digging.
Next thing you look at your policy and the rest. But
yeah,
a lot of landlords don't know about that type of insurance and how that's important to have, because it protects you from what I went through. And I didn't know either.
Yeah.
Thankfully I had that insurance, but in the early days I didn't know about that kind of insurance until I learned. Right.
That could have been dangerous.
We all have to learn, right?
Because you could have been months without rent.
Well, I would have been ruined.
Once more.
The ruined part of that book didn't come true, thankfully, but I could have been completely ruined. And I think he was banking on that. He was banking on the fact that perhaps I didn't have the right insurance, or I didn't have insurance, and then that would have completely ruined me.
You mentioned before we were recording, he had tenant insurance.
He
So
did, yeah.
properly, he should have canceled it first and then done it.
Well, perhaps, but
But
the
then he'd be
insurance didn't really cause like it. No, I'm not an insurance expert, but I don't think that the insurance from his side, even when he was declared at fault by the company, clearly they saw him at fault. I don't think it covered a lot of the rebuild part of the process. I think and then he also made claim to some of his belongings.
Yeah, like he should.
So no doubt some of that insurance even covered that.
Right.
So I don't know what the
Right.
ratio of his personal insurance, and like I mentioned, it was the same company. So, I was like, and I even said to them, well, why don't you just kind of talk amongst yourself and decide what covers what,
Yeah.
you
You guys talk directly. Because my understanding of insurance is that your insurance will sue his insurance. Because
right.
the tenant's
Yes.
liable, right? And they'll sue because he's got insurance. So they actually have recourse, but I'm not sure if they're going to sue themselves.
Abrogation, or there's like a process where they kind of lock down your policy or something like that, and they don't release it until they've decided whether they're going to sue.
Mhm.
And I don't know what they did, but that was a part of the process. And again, I don't know how that would an insurance company sue themselves, or would they kind of sue the person personally? Would that be a process? Like if you cause,
Maybe they just settle.
or they would just cut bait and they know that they're not going to get anything, right? They've got to honor their policy, but then on the other side, they know this guy's a deadbeat and he'll never pay up. So why just
Well, that's why his insurance. But so I've actually had this from my clients as well, is that when a tenant caused a fire, if my clients had tenants the upstairs who weren't at fault for the fire, they didn't have tenant insurance, but they didn't have the money for a hotel. So then they asked my client for funds for a hotel. And that's what tenant insurance is for. That's one of the things that tenant insurance covers.
Right.
So could you imagine if your tenant asked you as well, hey, Kevin, you put me up in a hotel.
Well,
4 stars are better.
It's in the book, but I texted him. I said, okay, this was the next day. And I said, who started the fire? And he initially said, I don't know. I got a lot of things to deal with. So there's some bad words in there, but, and I said, you can tell me who started the fire, And then his response was it you?
Like you were in the home without him knowing.
This guy, the worst. At this point, his son was in jail for arson. And I of course, I didn't know at the time that
No one told you?
there were charges. No, the police didn't tell me. Nobody, I talked to the detective. He didn't tell me. I still didn't know. I didn't know from
You're the victim. They don't tell you these things.
The case that went to the courts. I never found out how it ended. I was not notified at any point during this case.
Why wouldn't they want you as a witness? You're the victim.
I don't know, but I had no involvement, and nor did they tell me or share any information. I had to go looking for it, and I eventually did get the information from the courts, but it was a process. It's in the book, but honestly, it was not great to think that something like this would happen, and I would be left in the dark completely about what was going on. They even at the point of the fire, they posted a cop there for like 2 days straight to keep everybody out of the house. And the cop didn't even tell me what was going on. He did. I show up right at the point where the fire happened, and I'm there the same night. And the cop's like, well, call the detective. I can't tell you anything, but you can't go inside.
Now, what are you doing with the house?
Now the house is rebuilt. I moved back into it, and I'm living there. So that's where I'm at now. What comes next, I don't know.
Rent the basement, sweet it out.
I don't know if I can do that again. I'm still not quite there, but that's really the only option: sell the house or rent it. And I think number one is the likely outcome.
Are you going to do any more investments in Ontario?
Yeah, perhaps it will happen. You know, I've been looking at other properties. I've been looking at maybe a property closer to the city. I would do it again. I just it's I'm taking time to recover, and to be fair, I expected him to come back. I expected to see him. I expected him to consistently return and to fight and to be a problem. I knew his car model and his plate number, and I would, I'd scan the plate of any car that I saw that was like his car. I've only since started to just sort of ease up on sort of the sort of reflex things I used to do.
My
He
God,
actually
he
would
traumatized.
he came to the house after the fire, and he was he drove up.
He came to Hamilton from Oshawa?
No, he came to I was in Oshawa, and he came to the house.
Okay.
And I don't know why I was there at the time, but I was working on the door he had destroyed to the garage. So I'm there, and then he drives up, blocks my car, blocks my car in the driveway. He comes out of the car, starts screaming and hollering at me. He brings two other guys out of a Jeep. He he kind of comes around my car, and then there's a box there, and he kicks the box at me, which thankfully it didn't hurt that much, but continues to scream and act violently, and even said that he'd be on me like for another couple of years, that I couldn't get rid of him.
Call the police?
No, I didn't. But at some point, I had to just kind of keep my cool. I was angry and yelling too. But I expected that to reoccur. Like that was like a month and a half after the fire. I expected him to continue.
That's some sort of harassment.
Yeah, and he would scream, "Where's my chair? Where's my
He doesn't even live there anymore. He went
where's my rubber mats?" He had rubber mats in the driveway, and he was screaming at me for rubber mats. You stole my propane tanks. Well, whatever is here is here. You got propane tanks, go get them. So he told his buddies that came in the Jeep, and they went to the backyard and got the propane tanks because he was a big grow op enthusiast. But oh yeah, he was running a grow op in my house as well. So he had this little, like one of the bedrooms in a 4-bedroom house, and one of the bedrooms he had this sort of hydroponic tent that filled the entire room, and he was growing all sorts of,
a legal amount, or
well, obviously a legal amount, because that tent was probably filled with all sorts of plants, and he had all this paraphernalia for growing and sodding and all this. That's why he really balked at a lot of my inspections. I didn't know at the time, but he really got bent
usually
out of
red
shape.
flag, yeah.
He destroyed the house when I tried to inspect the house, and that ultimately I would learn later, because that really put him out. Because if I inspect the house and I see this big grow up in the house, that's bad for him, and he had to clean that up, shove it all in the closet. So I learned after the fact a lot of this act, a lot of this behavior, and where it sort of stem from. You know what I mean?
But he was in the wrong, and he's giving you a hard time.
Well, yeah, sometimes you just don't know why. In a lot of ways, I thought his behavior was very erratic, and I didn't understand at the time. Okay, I want to inspect. I got in there. I left. It took me about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. You don't have to go and destroy the back sliding door. He smashed the window, and he smashed the door to the garage. He smashed, he smashed the garage door. He filed off the handle off the garage. Like, you don't have to go that far. It seemed very erratic and overblown. So, yeah, at some point I was, I didn't understand that, but that understanding would come over time when I started to fill in the blanks with some of this. And writing the book kind of helped as well a little bit, in a way of like, okay, well, help fill in the blanks. It sort of prompted me to talk to people like neighbors, talk to, working with other people that were sort of like the fellow that the vehicle, he was burglarized his vehicle before the fire. He started the fire, but just before that, he went into that vehicle and stole the. Um, it was a electronic fishing gear thing. So anyway, I eventually managed to talk to him, and we had a long discussion about what happened and what kind of played out, and why he wasn't charged for theft. And then Barry is the tenant, but Barry eventually actually gave him a personal check to pay for the device, and the cops let it go in the moment. So a lot of this was a process of trying to fill the blanks in, right? For me, when you're like blind to all that's going on and just trying to understand it after the fact, you try to understand where does this come from? How does this happen? Why are those folks like they are? I do get into a little bit of this, like why. What do I know about these people? Why would they be like that? Why would he be like that? You know what I mean? So it's a process of discovery, and I just wanted to know more, and so that's part of what the book's about as well. I want to chronicle the experience, but I wanted to understand things better because a lot of it I was in the dark. Like one day there's a house, and the next day it's burned, completely destroyed. What you know, uh, for me, it's hard to just sort of accept. I want to know. I want to know more. Right.
And then you were on the CBC discussing this in your property.
Yes, of course. The CBC.
Can you bring it up?
The CBC interviewed me on the National. That's me going into the basement.
So this is post fire. How long after? How long
That's
after
just
the
after
fire?
the fire. So you see all of that's the drywall burning, and then the beams were all burned out. It primarily went out. Actually, just briefly, you see that clump of plastic, whatever.
That's where you
So
believe the fire to have started, and
it seems obvious where that. Oh, there it is. So all of the sort of clump of plastic burned. Like it seems like that he kind of made a pile of some plastic something, and maybe it started that way, or maybe he had a look like that right there. See that? It looked like maybe the piece of a car in a way, but it's possible maybe that he dropped a candle or something, or and then it started to burn, and they never really kind of stopped it or noticed it.
right.
I don't really. I can't.
Well, end of the day, they were convicted. Is that the term? Or they were charged with arson.
Right. So the son was charged with arson. Now, like I said, I don't know the outcome of that charge,
So weird.
but I feel like,
And he's in an asylum or something.
yeah, I feel like he was committed to a mental, uh, what do they call these folks? The places, the mental institution or something like that. Uh, and I would presume that they considered him a danger
To society.
to society, so
Yeah.
they wouldn't even let him out on supervised visits. But even more strange, or perhaps interesting, was that the arson charge came with a peace bond against his father. So he was ordered not to be anywhere near his father, who they lived together. Right, the father is the fellow on the book on the cover, but he was ordered not to be anywhere near his father for a certain amount of time, and also ordered not to be at the house. So not only is the LTB taking 8 months to get around to giving me possession of my house, legally, the tenants, at least one of the tenants, wasn't even legally allowed to be at the house, but still was a tenant legally. So it's just all you would think that if there's a peace bond on somebody that legally doesn't allow them to go to that property, that's enough to just
And the tenancy.
terminate the tenancy. It's over. Nope.
Nope. Do you see why I'm scared?
You should be.
I am. Why do you think I
I'm
exited?
sorry to say, but I don't want to freak you out, but it is a bit of a minefield right now, and we really want to improve this environment for everybody involved, and
Same here for the betterment of our society.
yeah,
I love to see it too.
there just needs to be basic justice, and uh, and incentives need to change, and we need to just change the behavior. We need to make sure that people, if they think about doing something bad, they think twice.
So let's start with what are the lessons? What could have been done differently with the screening? What would you if fast forward to today's times, because technology today is better than ever. And for tenant screening tools, what would you do differently today? And you're a tech guy.
Indeed, I am. Uh, First thing I would do differently is number one, don't just trust what people say. Honestly, I think I'm trusting perhaps to a fault, but I think that, you know, I don't always just accept that people will say something and they're not going to lie to you. So I think that that was first and foremost. A lot of the stuff that he showed or said, I just trusted it on face value. And people will lie to you, and that happens. And I think that we, trust but verify, as they say, right?
Mhm.
And I didn't do as much verify as I did trust. So that's number one. I think two, I would have made use of the screening tools that were available even then, and there are some great robust screening tools that are available out there now. Anything from Rent Panda to Single Key to Front Lobby, they do their own sort of screening. Rent Check, all of these tools are out there and were out there at the time to take advantage of
Mhm.
screening better.
Right.
I accepted the credit report from him directly, and you should never ever accept a tenant's credit report. You
Yeah,
should
verify. Yeah.
go to a go to a reputable place, go to Equifax, go somewhere and get the report on your tenant yourself and get it directly from an institution that you trust.
Yeah.
So that
Because everything can be photoshopped.
of course everything can be changed.
Assume everything's been photoshopped. So how would you operate differently, right?
Manipulated, anything can be manipulated. So all of those things also. I've also looked at his former landlord, and often they say go two landlords back, or even sometimes even further. And I left it at that, and so there was a glowing reference, and that was it. So that's another thing I perhaps would have done differently, or tried to improve the process. Some of this is just low tech, you know what I mean? One of the biggest things I could have done differently was just trusting my gut. You know, there were things that he did that were unusual, but they served to move the process along faster. Right? He was eager to rent. Even I think in early days, in the first initial contact, he was ready to sign the lease before actually seeing the property. Now you know, I was adamant that you need to see the property, and eventually he came to see the
Yeah.
property, and he
For a
wanted,
local person, that's really odd.
right. So that should have set off red flags.
Yeah.
And my gut was feeling something unusual about this, but in my infant landlord stage, I didn't really,
Yeah.
I didn't know better. But that kind of thing is like trust your gut. When something feels odd, don't stop and think about it.
Yeah.
Stop and figure out what you know. So there's these little red flags that he kind of had that told me that okay, maybe there is uh, something going on, and it's totally a low tech situation. You know what I mean? Look inside their car. Try to go to their property and see how they're living now. You know what I mean? Meet their landlord at where they live now to verify that they're. You know what I mean? Do all of these things and sort of trust your gut. You know, and that's one thing I could have done better. Talking to the landlord reference, we did that, and it went well. Of course, another thing I think I should have done better is get ID, get more details. I kind of left. I understand the idea of feeling you're intruded upon by providing all of this information, but I should have at least gotten a driver's license photocopy or something. You know what I mean? That's standard practice, and I didn't do that. So
I just came back from China. I feel like they've seen me naked.
I hope not.
To give context, pretty much any my train ticket, to get into any major attraction, to buy the ticket, they required my passport, and then my passport became my like my entry, how I entered. So they'd had devices to scan my passport, and then that's how they verified I had a ticket. The ticket itself was useless.
What about the scoring system? They have some sort of a scoring.
I'm just a tourist, so I don't think I
So it didn't
qualify.
actually affect you in any way, or did you see people being scored, or did you have a sort of a score attached to you somehow while you're moving around?
Again, I'm not a citizen, so I don't think they maybe.
okay.
But again, yeah, maybe if I did some sort of wrong, I'd start a file.
Oh, well, hopefully that's not the case.
Yeah,
You know,
but there's cameras everywhere.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right?
cameras.
And so from like for like that society, I ask someone for their picture of their passport. No, yeah, right here. I have it on me at all time.
Yeah, you get in trouble, I guess, if you
Right.
didn't produce
Yeah,
it.
in China, you're required to carry your passport as a non-resident. Yeah.
Oh.
I think that's part of the reason why they require your passport for entering any sort of very, like, for example, for a Canadian, if you're going to the CN, the analogy would be if you're going to the CN Tower, you have to have your passport, right?
Yeah.
If you're a non-citizen, right? Like the citizens had their own smaller card, but again, they were using their identification card to gain access to train to the major trains and the major tourist attractions. So yeah, really weird.
A lot of
So asking for ID is like no problem for me.
totalitarian implications there, tracking people, and you bring all that information to the top, and then they know exactly where you went.
Yeah.
Every moment they know where you went.
Yeah. Imagine your tennis social score now, though.
I can only assume it's low. Very low. But yeah, so those are some of the main things I would do with screening. But they,
And also,
there's
almost
so
all.
we,
I
in
think
our
all those.
our wiki databases has
Yeah.
a ton of uh, screening processes that come from all different places, from different. We actually bring together a lot of different people that are known in the industry, like
Mhm.
Gary Fine, Rent Panda
Yeah.
has a really great screening. Hart Togman, who runs Rent Panda,
Yeah.
he has great insights about screening and how to approach that. A lot of this stuff is just like trusting your gut and
Mhm.
trusting when you see something that doesn't fit, doesn't make sense, and being patient. I think what tenants do that are when they're professional or they're looking to do bad things, they want that process to go fast. And
Less screening.
yes, you want to slow it down. You want to run, you want to take a piece of paper, like a pay stub or something like that. I should have verified his income better as well, by the way. But you want to take that and you want to just stop and look at it and
Yeah.
take your time.
Call the
Look
employer.
for inconsistencies. Look at the date. Is it really out of date? Look at the address. Is it the same address as the address he told you was his last? On and on and on. Just slow it down
Yeah.
and focus. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and call the employer. Yeah.
And call the employer, of course, and call and verify it. And always trust and then verify,
Yeah.
or verify then trust, depending on who you talk to.
I just put everything in the hands of folks like Rent Panda. Hart's been owner of Rent Panda's been on the show. Hart, Villar's been on the show twice already, and waiting for him to come back a third time. Zach Gillum is a good old friend of mine from Front Lobby. Yeah,
And they're all great. And the idea with these services, they're amazing, and to use them as a part of the process is important. I always say to the landlords, don't really ever give up that active process. You know what I mean? Use these services, use your tools, use openroom.ca to verify information and, screen the tenants, but take an active process with this. You know what I mean? Because when you combine it all together, when you have Rent Panda screen your tenant, or you have Single Key screen your tenant, and then you are actively involved in screening them as well, and then all of that tied together is going to be very difficult for a professional
Mhm.
career
Mhm.
professional tenant to get past that sort of
Mhm.
wall. And sadly, the way it is now, though, it's not a guarantee that they won't get there.
Right.
We're still seeing people that do all the right things, and still these professional tenants are finding ways to,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So we have to be extremely diligent all the
Right.
time and use all the tools you can. Like there are such great tools now. Like Rent Check does some background checks on people. They can do that. You can do criminal checks.
Mhm.
I think is it Front Lobby, but some of these services now they offer a more
think Single
in-depth
Key
criminal
does.
check, and they do other background checks on people that can really kind of surface some things that you might want to know,
Mhm.
especially if it was an arson charge, right?
Mhm.
And things like that. So use all the available tools you can, and then be actively involved.
Mhm.
You know,
I do want to add though that with from my experience, especially like, including my clients, it's not the I can't. Nothing comes top of mind where any of my clients were had a professional tenant. It was more the problems came from a tenant who broke mentally or health during the tenancy. Right. So the story I've been sharing is my client in Brantford. The tenant's health basically just fell apart. They were stuck in a bed, plugged in on life support. No rent was coming in. Wasn't paying utilities, but the utilities company knew they couldn't shut it off because if they shut it off, he's dead. But again, now we have the private landlord bearing, like, basically paying for this person to be there. Like,
Yeah, that's tough.
and there's no, and that's what the system's become. It's on the private landlord to support those who can't protect themselves.
Right, and that's certainly a bigger conversation, but it's true. It's the environment now that is the 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 work of social outreach, and even social housing is been put on the private landlord to a certain
Right.
degree, to extreme degrees, and it's a burden that ought to be put by
Yeah.
the different levels of government, but they have sort of shirked their responsibility in that.
Mhm.
And even more sort of absurd is the government has started to get into meddling with
Yeah.
the private market interests,
Yeah.
i.e. rent eviction bylaws and things like that, whereas when they should just stay in their lane and focus on social housing
Yeah.
and increasing more beds and more properties and more robust systems that allow landlords that are frankly just running their business, allow them not to go and be ruined by an event that
Yeah.
is unexpected.
Yeah, don't meddle
Right.
with the private. When like you mentioned Singapore, you were in Singapore. I was in Singapore. I think Singapore has somewhere around 200 million. Sorry, around 2 million public housing units, where the average rent is about $400-500 a month for an apartment. Hong Kong, the average rent is about $300-400 a month for a government assisted supported building, and they have about 2 million citizens in those units.
Right. And why can't we be like that? Why can't we have our government, all levels of government,
Yeah.
focus on social housing and then provide beds for people as is their directive?
Right.
Their-
Versus making us a political problem.
Of course.
But again, like, for me, I'm just exiting the environment. I'm just going to an easier playing field.
And a lot of this is all like multiple levels, right? You've got anything from the shelters to the hostels to the uh, uh, to the social beds to the temporary housing of like hotels. You've got the more long term housing. You've got subsidized housing. You got all these levels of social
In
housing.
hotels.
Yes, all of these
We're,
levels
we're
are.
putting up refugees in hotels.
And then you got the Peterborough style, like the small or sort of outhouse type of houses that are transitional housing. All of these things are all on the table, and the government could rightly just focus on that, and then do that well, and become more like now. Certainly, Singapore is not an ideal in a lot of ways, but to be able to get to the point where we could have, every single person, the government has enough money from taxes. It would be to get to the point where the government actually is doing their jobs and providing for people that need supports for housing to get them supports for housing. So then, the private landlord is not having to
Yeah, don't make us do it.
support freeloaders for 6, 8 months or 12
Or
months.
more.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, we see arrears now go over $100,000,
Hmm.
and it's crazy that the LTB is still their jurisdictional limit is 35,000, where it's not long now to get to 35,000. Even rents are dropping, but it's doesn't take long. So,
And that's enough money for a house or two in the States to buy.
I can imagine that some professional tenants are taking that money and buying houses with them.
God, it's not encouraged then. So Kevin, let's
So-
talk about I think every Ontario landlord should be a solo member. Would you
Yes.
disagree?
Yes, I do agree, and I think that also that every past landlord should be a solo member, and every potential future landlord should be a solo member. So there's a ton of
May scare a lot
homeowners
of
out
people,
there
though.
that are possibly going to be renting out their basement or renting out a property or investing in a property. Everyone that is likely to involve themselves in rentals ought to be a member, learn about how our environment is in Ontario,
Yeah.
and know before you go and do it. You got to know as much as you can.
Mhm.
That's so important. So I appeal to anyone, whether it be a homeowner or not, whether it be a former or future landlord. We want to have everybody that's involved in this and has a stake in this, right? And we have upwards of 4 million, I think, homeowners in Ontario right now. I think north of 600,000 landlords. perhaps. So there are a lot of landlords out there, period. Anyways, yeah, and really just to get to the point where we can be actively involved in changing the course of this justice conversation, because the government, it's been said, is often worried about the tenant population because of their numbers, but what's
There's
important
way
to
more voters
realize,
amongst them.
there are way more voters that are homeowners, a ton more voters. They should be worried about people that own properties that could rent or will rent or might have rented in the past. That is the constituency that is the powerful constituency. And if we built that fear for that group of people in the government, there may be a point when they start to take notice and start making real change, right? It's power in numbers. So regardless, we just ask our landlords or anybody that would like to register with Solo to learn more about this process, learn more about the RTA, learn more about anything you want to learn. Go to members.solo.ca and register there, and we'll add you to the group. You can get into our Facebook group. You can get into discussions. You can get into webinars, wiki. We do a ton of educational content and try to just learn from our experiences. You know what I mean? Every single part of my experience not only went into a book, it went into every part of everything that I learned from my experience went in, was injected into Solo. And so what we have is this sort of this thing that is growing, and it's growing fast, but it's every landlord's experience is just being brought into the Solo collective. And we try to pass that on to every landlord. Oh, you've got fraud charges. Well, pass that on. Oh, you built an ADU in the backyard. Well, pass that on. Learn about how to do that. Oh, you work with the sheriff and you've got possession of your property. Pass that knowledge on. It took 14 weeks to get Peel to come out to do an eviction, a possession handover. Pass that on, that information. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
we
we
become
do-
like a cloud of knowledge.
it's just a very a growing group of people that is building that idea of just building knowledge within the group.
Yeah.
From
Crowdsource
experience, right?
knowledge.
And that's what we're after. We're after landlords that come to us. We help them the best we can, and they come back and help us help others, because through all those experiences we learn so much. Right.
I'm not saying people should only join Solo. I think there's so many great organizations. I
True.
think it's just one of, and I believe every landlord should get themselves educated, because the saying I don't know if I got it from someone else. Let's assume someone else got it because I'm not that smart. But the saying was, you either learn how LTB RTA works, or the tenant's going to teach you. Which would you prefer?
Right.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense, and it is true though.
Right.
You're gonna, if you don't learn it that way, you're gonna learn the other way, and the
Yeah.
other way is the hard way, the hard way.
And then the cliche, an inch of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of the cure. And so joining Solo would be prevention. Using these screening tools you recommended would be prevention, and that'll prevent you from the tons of pain.
And people only have so much time in the day,
Yeah.
and it's understandable. You know what I mean? And we can't learn everything in a minute, and we only have enough attention span for X amount of information.
Then
But
do something passive.
We're very directed in what we do, and we really try to hone in on what people need to know the best we can, and provide. A lot of people learn in different ways. Someone might learn by watching a video, where others might learn by reading information, or maybe people like to read a book. Or I've never made an audio book yet, but maybe that will come. Maybe people want to hear the book, but at some point, we try to offer every kind of way that people can actually get themselves into a more learned position. Because I often hear from people all the time, I'm thinking about renting out something, or I'm thinking about this, or I had a bad experience with renting. How are things right now? You know what I mean? My friend went to LTB. I could rent my condo out. I was thinking, what do you think? Is it possible or a good idea? All of these questions come up all the time, and it's the prevention aspect. It's the taking the little time, learning a bit more, learning about the market, learning about your, the environment of Ontario, and learning about the risk that you face. There's a lot of this doom and gloom, but really understanding the risks involved and making an informed choice, more than anything. you know, if you choose to do something, I made a choice that was not an informed choice. I rented my property and I did not inform myself in any way, shape, or form. So when and then you can decide. You can make a better decision. You can
Mhm.
say, maybe I don't want to do this, or maybe I do want to do this. I can accept the risk. I can, I got a little bit of savings. You know, I got a little bit of a buffer, maybe $20,000 savings. I can handle the wait for the LTB. I can embark on this. So each to their own, but making that informed choice is just safer
Mhm.
for everybody in
Mhm.
this environment, right?
Now, for listeners interested in helping out solo, for example, it not for example, it is a nonprofit, no charge membership.
Right.
If someone wanted to help out, how can they help?
Yeah, so they can get in touch with us. There are several ways. There's a ton of information on the website about
Yeah.
about us and how to contact us, maybe getting on the mailing list. But more than just that, you can perhaps email us at solo@solo.ca. Reach out and say that you're willing to help out. We are always looking for volunteers. We're always looking for people that have you know skills in particular industries,
Mhm.
in tech or in other avenues that can bring that to the table. We're always looking for volunteers, so just open the conversation, say hi. I saw you on a podcast, and
From the CBC or
exactly, so email
anywhere,
solo@solo.ca and say I'd like to help out, and then we can have that
right?
conversation.
And you have opportunities for sponsors because we at Share are a proud sponsor.
Yes, of course. We have recommended professionals, and our recommended professionals, we do vetting of the professionals, but we welcome this. You know what I mean? And you get in front of our small landlord community.
8,300 of them.
Yeah, of course. And so we do some vetting, and then of course, you can sponsor and be on the website, and be part of the recommended professional list.
Mhm.
Anything for paralegals, we're always expanding that list to paralegals, collections agencies, screening tools, on and on and on.
Mhm.
And we have a lot of deep integrations that we're trying to build even more on that concept, because this is really what supports solo at the end of the day. We really, we want to keep the lights on, and obviously we have to do that with money. And so these are avenues that we have to make that possible.
Any in-person events planned for 2025?
Oh yeah, we have an annual gala that we run, and we run that in the fall, and there will be a third annual gala. We do meet and greets all the time. We were looking at doing it in Ottawa, perhaps again Niagara Falls. We did one in Niagara Falls. So we try to do little get-togethers as well. We don't actually have it on the table as far as a date goes, but we might do two of those in a year,
Nice.
maybe more, depending on if there's local landlords that want to get together,
Well, there are.
right?
I have friends in all those areas.
And yeah, we do that. We love to do that, and then our board will try to get out there wherever that is, you know. Um, and we do events that are smaller local associations. So I've spoken at Peterborough Landlord Association. We've spoken at the Brampton Landlord Association. So local associations, we go out to their events, and anytime they have, they welcome us to speak, or they want us involved. So we work hand in hand with those guys, and we support them the best we can. Um, and yeah, we're lobbying the government, so we have a lobby days at Queens Park. We did that last November. Looking to do more of that, although that's not a public thing. And yeah, we in the past have done protests. We don't really see a protest happening this year, but it could come up that we'll protest.
Maybe a
This
federal one. Okay.
Well, that's what I wanted to point out. That this year seems like a very political election year. We're obviously going to get a federal election, but it's entirely possible that Doug Ford calls an early provincial election to sort of ride on the coattails of the PC party, right? Especially if they're on the ascendancy in the federal level. So we could see,
I'm expected to dominate.
yeah, we could see a federal and provincial election this year, which would sort of be kind of a big transition year for political interest, especially for landlords. Um, and what is it going to look like, Pierre Polyev, in the federal level? Uh, will he improve the lot for small landlords or not? So looking at that and understanding what those policies are,
Yeah.
what ramifications there are, they almost can't get worse. But yes, they can get worse.
You know, if Pierre does nothing but kill the new capital gains inclusion rates, that'd be massive.
I think, yeah, maybe you sent that to me, but yeah,
Yeah, I said that to
I
you
think
guys.
it's likely. Yeah, it didn't pass. It's not he's gonna kill all that stuff. And, you know,
Do you know what great news that is?
it is great news. You know what I mean? Less tax is always great news. And,
For landlords, yeah.
you know,
We've already had a rough go.
I just, I don't know. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good news.
Because Ontario landlords are pretty much only in it for equity gains, so capital gains, right? So if then you're going to tax us, so you just took away some of our benefits of being a landlord, right?
Yeah, there's been talk of like unrealized gains tax.
Yeah.
This idea where they would go after
Won't be under Polybear, but yeah.
assessed unrealized gains, but obviously Polyev would never do that. So
No.
yeah, um,
It could be down the road for the next government.
yeah, you don't know, right? You never know, right? Polyev could come in and maybe it's not a landslide he was thinking, and then another minority government, and then NDP is now holding the sway of power with Polyev, and maybe that dynamic looks even more weird. So you have dental care and other things that NDP is pushing just to keep him in power. Like the unrest is the sort of the challenge, I think, on the federal level, right? Anytime there's this sort of transition time, whether it go back to like Joe Clark and ascending, or until there's some sort of like a normalization, and then I think you had Mulrooney come into the mix, and then kind of stabilized. But this sort of transition period where one guy leaves and another guy, and then you have maybe a temporary person comes in like Kim Campbell or Paul Martin comes in, takes over the spot, and then he kind of loses, and then that kind of unrest in the environment really, I think, spells trouble for a lot of things.
Well, Trump's about to be inaugurated,
right? And we have a lot to deal with. We have USMCA is coming up to be renegotiated. The possible tariffs. There's a lot of things that need to be tended to. That kind of will they or will they not? But this unrest at the federal level can spell some challenges. So I just hope for a resolution. People will vote. Waiting till March, I don't know if that's a great idea, but they will vote. They will put somebody in power, and then it just sort of normalizes the environment where they can focus on dealing with the problems and dealing with what has to happen, right?
And then based on the current polls, the new normal is looking like the opposition party will be the Bloc Québécois.
And that's not a first.
Not a first. That's definitely interesting because their agenda is really different.
It's very unusual that
they don't have a national interest agenda.
Yeah, exactly. A one province party is got so much power, but it's not. It's not new, of course, but it's
kind of sad to see the politics because that's not the news.
Yeah, it would take everything to the right. You know what I mean? Like every single everything is right leaning at that point. NDP is like niche. The Liberals would be completely destroyed, and then it's a whole new Canada. It's good still. It's good though. It's good.
Change has to happen. Kevin, you've been really generous with your time over time. Any final words you'd like to leave for like a newer investor or someone considering entering the market?
Yeah, I would say most important, just take your time. Really look at what you can learn out there in the market. Talk to people. Join solo. Reach out to any of us. You can call our phone number 647-792-4951. It's on the website. Just really learn as much as you can about what you're embarking on, and then go for it. You know what I mean? There is no shortage of people here at Solo that will do anything we can to help out. Whether you're a landlord in crisis, or you're a landlord learning to be a landlord, or you're a landlord that is somewhat reluctant, we're here to help. And so reach out.
There's this old lesson from Warren Buffett that I've always referred to. He was actually answering Tim Ferriss's question about being a stock investor, and Warren's answer was, if you're not willing to invest 15 hours a week in researching stocks, then you are thus an amateur. Invest in the index, go back to your life, right? And I think for someone who's going to get into real estate investing, I think it's no different. You should be investing at least 15 hours a week to research, or else you're going to run into a lot of problems.
I agree. It makes a lot of sense. You know what I mean? You've got to take on that responsibility and take it seriously,
Mhm.
right? I perhaps maybe didn't take it as seriously as I could. And I'm not the first to share this, you know,
Yeah.
Ting will tell you the same, right? The take it seriously, take
Yeah.
the time, you
Yeah.
know,
Stock investors too, take it seriously.
is it 15 hours a week or 15, like just take the time to
Yeah.
take it seriously because the ramifications could be catastrophic if you go wrong. So
Mhm.
just yeah, it's a great thing to be guided by, you know.
Even if it's Bitcoin, even if it's gold, take 15 hours a week for a while before you
Of
decide to
course,
get into it.
yeah. There's no some people are in precarious situations. Maybe they're in a bit of a hurry, but I think most people, when they're looking at investing, they're not. They're only rushed by their own personal, you know, need for something, or they feel that the economy isn't going in different directions,
FOMO.
or FOMO. Yeah. So you know, you don't have to rush.
Mm.
Take your time, learn,
Yeah.
understand, read a few books. I'm sure you have many book recommendations, but you know, learn what you're embarking on and getting into, and it is still good. It's a
Yeah.
good environment. It's a
Yeah.
good. Ontario is a great place to invest. You know, you can be a landlord, you can be an investor, you can be an owner and live in your property.
Mhm.
And there are equity gains in real estate. Real
Mhm.
estate's still really good to invest in.
Mhm.
So we want a healthy market, and so that's what we're after, and we just hope people take the time and take it seriously.
I like ChatGPT as well for a research source. I was actually messing around with it because after the whole Trump trolling Trudeau about Canada being the 51st state, and then the New York Post came out with an article like, absolutely not, we don't want Canada. Some of the points were, you know, our lack of we have very low GDP. Our GDP per capita is about 70% of an American. So we earn our revenues per Canadian is much lower, 30% less than an American. And what was it? If Canada became a state, it would be the fourth poorest state of the 51 states, below Alabama. Now factor in that, so we'd be the fourth lowest, yet our average home price in Canada is just under 700,000 Canadian. Alabama's average home price is 225,000 American.
It's wild. But if that were to happen, hypothetically,
I don't think it'll ever happen.
in a hypothetical, we become the 51st state. Do we get richer or do we get poorer?
Those with hard assets will win. It's always the way. You will, if those with hard assets will definitely outperform those without. So this be devastating for renters.
Yeah, you know, you know, we're a branch plan economy. In the end, economically, we're so tied to the U.S. In a lot of ways, we are kind of another state, even though we're not. Obviously, we've struggled with our own identity as a Canadian, whatever culturally. You know, our reliance on immigration, while good, is often been challenged by a lot of people in our country, especially at the top. I think Canada is, you know, in need of an identity, and to you know, we always often look to our southern neighbors for monetary whatever, or identity, or cultural interest. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
All this stuff tends to bleed into us in unusual ways. We send all our comedians to them, so we, you know, I don't. I think this would be, in a way, you could make the case that this is often just a symbolic thing. He's trolling because it is a trolling move, because it's mostly symbolic.
Mm-hmm.
As a North American environment, we're so directly intertwined with 1 point whatever billion trillion dollars of goods that go back and forth, that our supply chains are like one big entity in the end anyway.
We're very much like one of their states. If you look at the amount of trade that's done.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a Nexus card holder. I can walk across the border like it's like it feels illegal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
largest undefended border in the world.
yeah, exactly. So, you know, this environment is we kind of, you know, we're missing the real point of how, you know, our sovereignty sort of rears its head. How do we culturally abide by our own set of rules, and how do we find our own identity within this environment where we're overpowered by the Captain Americas of the world. You know what I mean? There's no Captain Canada that is, overtaking the US, right? So, well, there's a Captain Canuck, I think. But anyway,
You're right.
at the end of the day, I think we're, these are distractions from our real questions of, sovereignty, cultural identity in the end. What do we do about media, news, interest? What stories are we telling ourselves? What are we as a country? What do we want to be as a country? Those are the real questions. The fake questions are these, pictures of, Trump in front of a Switzerland. He's got a picture of him on a mountain next to the Canadian flag, but the freaking mountain is in Switzerland. What's he looking at? Not Canadian. So this is often, I think, where we're at in the world in our sort of discourse, where we're often distracted by, shiny,
Yeah,
squirrely things, but
agree.
it keeps us from our real questions, which are fundamental. Like if Polyev comes in and defunds or disbands the CBC, we have a lot of sort of cultural questions to have to answer.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch my hockey night in Canada.
Well, of course, that's already been bled into Sportsnet, and it's starting to look like a whatever. You think that they're just on the precipice of charging people, no longer making accessible, even on Saturdays. But we have some very serious cultural implications that might come from losing CBC. But then, is it a state-run operation or is it not? These are big questions, right? So, my hope for the future of this stuff is just so we have those kind of conversations and less the all the people are saying that we're going to take over Canada.
And at the end of the day, I think we all need to rely on ourselves to build our wealth and take care of our families.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
of course.
That should always be priority one over what Trump is saying.
Yeah, and it's important to trust yourself because you know what's right for you and your family, and don't let other people tell you what's right for you. What's the right amount of free speech? What's the right amount of phone time? A lot of the conversations about whether kids should have a phone until whatever age. A lot of these questions are very personal for you.
I think the Americans are going to ban TikTok soon, so we don't have that choice.
It's likely it's going to happen, but I tend to think these things will always backfire. So people will want it more, and they will get it more, and they'll sideload TikTok left and right, and it'll be even worse for people. But one never knows, right?
Kevin, thank you again for doing this.
Well, thank you, Erwin. I appreciate you having me, taking the time, and it's been great. Thank you so much.
Solo.ca.
Yeah.
Available everywhere on social media as well.
Yes, all over the place. We're everywhere.
All right, friends, that wraps up another episode of the Truth About Real Estate Investing show for Canadians. Hope you got as much out of this one as I did. Remember that whether you're just starting out or a seasoned investor, there's always something new to learn, and it's always about building that practical knowledge base that gets you closer to financial freedom. If you found value today, please do us a favor and leave us a review or a rating, share this episode with a friend, or better yet, join our community of real estate investors who are taking action and making moves. And hey, if there's a topic you want us to cover or have there's a certain guest you'd like us to have on the show, drop me a line. My DMs are open on social media. Reply to this email that this have arrived on. I'm not hard to find. We're all about getting you the unfiltered truth to help you on your journey. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode. Until then, stay smart, stay curious, and keep building that future. Catch you later.